First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am Anil Kathar, young professional, Center for Hill Area Development, DMR Division, and NIDM, and I will be moderating today. On behalf of the Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, and National Disaster Management Authority, Ministry of Home Affairs, I welcome you all to today's webinar on transforming disasters challenges into opportunities. The webinar aims to foster point 9 to ensure that the opportunity to learn from a disaster is not wasted of our Honorable Prime Minister's 10-point agenda on DRR. Disasters are a learning process. They can serve as laboratories for understanding the elements, the factors that governs their destructive powers. The systematic knowledge gained from past catastrophic events can guide us to policies and practices that will help in developing the better understanding of all the dimensions of disaster management and thus reducing risk of loss of life, property, and natural resources. I am hopeful that the webinar will be fruitful in bringing out the framework needed to grasp every opportunity provided by a disaster. The dignitaries who have joined us for today's inaugural session include Shri Kamal Kishore, Member and NDMA, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, VSM Executive Director NIDM, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division NIDM. Honorable Minister for Road Transport and Highways, Shri Nitin Gadkari ji was also supposed to join us, but due to some inevitable piece of work, he is not able to join, but he has conveyed his best wishes for the success of the event. For the technical session, we will be having distinguished speakers, Shri Kamal Kishore, Member NDMA, Professor V.K. Sharma, VC, Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, Dr. T. Datta, Head NGP, Department of Science and Technology, Shri Mihir Bhatt, Director AITMI, Dr. Ashish Kumar Srivastav, IAS, DDMA Dehradun, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division NIDM. Now, I would request Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division NIDM, to welcome the dignitaries and participants through his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. Good morning to all the dignitaries and all the delegates of this particular webinar. We are very much heartfully grateful to our dignitaries, particularly Shri Kamal Kishore, Honorable Member of National Disaster Management Authority, Professor Vinod Kumar Sharma ji, Honorable Vice Chairman of Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, Shri Mihir Bhatt, Director, All India Disaster Mitigation Institute, and ED NIDM, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Vasisht Seva Medal, who have all joined us in this inaugural program besides other important delegates. So we are very much thankful. This webinar is actually a joint effort being taken up by NIDM and NIDM together. And the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda has been covered in different webinars, being focusing on different agenda points. So this particular webinar is focusing on agenda point 9, which is based on opportunities for lessons learned from disasters which have happened should not be wasted. So that means we have to record whatever lessons we have been taught by these disasters to us. So nature also is a teacher, because when we go wrong, it gives us a lesson, and we have to take up that lesson and implement in our life and lifestyles. So therefore, we will be discussing throughout this webinar that what are those lessons and how we have learned, and where are our gaps in our practices, policies, guidelines, that we are not able to reap the exact benefits of our efforts in disaster risk reduction and resilience, so that we can enhance and upgrade our efforts for disaster risk reduction and resilience. Without wasting time, because we have good number of dignitaries on this inaugural program, we would like to listen to them. So I would request to go ahead with this. I welcome all the dignitaries and the delegates for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your welcome address. To further address the participant, I hand over the mic to Executive Director NIDM, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Visit Seva Medal, and request him for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay. First of all, a very heartiest welcome to all the participants. Number is already touching 500, and more are joining, and many more are viewing on the YouTube. I welcome all the participants who have joined and also who are in the process of joining. And a special welcome to Shri Kamal Kishore member NDMA, who has always been supporting us in all our endeavors and always giving us the right guidance and right direction to take. And I welcome Professor Vinod Kumar, VK Sharma sir, and Dr. Mihir Bhatt for the inaugural session. And we are thankful to you, sirs, for gracing this occasion. Because this is a very important subject that we are discussing. It is the agenda number 9 of 10-point agenda of Honorable PM, which was given out in December 16 during the Asia Ministerial Conference. And it is these 10 points are a summarized version of all the international agreements that were there, like the Sendai Framework, the Paris Climate, as well as the SDGs. And just by following these 10 points, we can achieve disaster risk reduction and resilience in the country in its truest form. And that is why this initiative was taken by NDMA and NIDM, that we must discuss each point in detail with the various stakeholders. And like yesterday, Dr. P.K. Mishra said that we are doing 10 different webinars, but we should not, he cautioned us that we should not silo them in 10 different points, because many of the points are all interconnected. So maybe he gave us an idea of conducting a program. After conducting all 10, conduct a program on PM 10-point agenda, holistic approach, which we will again plan after discussions with NDMA. Coming down to today's topic, we are aware that we are at sort of world war with the virus. Just a few milligrams of virus has created havoc in the whole world, and which has caused serious disruption of the functioning of a community or the society. And we are witnessing large irresponsible preparedness of many countries, including economically most developed, whom we used to look up for medical interventions. And whereas this is a repeat of earlier pandemic of 1918, so it is nothing new that we got surprised. It is nothing new that there was no history or there was no empirical data to support it. So either the knowledge which was available was not delivered by the scientists in the proper way to the national governments and the societies so that it becomes useful, or the evidence-based knowledge which was delivered to the policymakers but was not used in many countries, allowing for the development of this disaster to this magnitude. So to significantly reduce a disaster risk and create a resilient environment, scientific knowledge as well as public awareness during crisis and disasters is very, very important. And to efficiently manage this pandemic, science and research-based information has been made available, is being made available, and should be made available to people by local authorities well in advance. Because today the community is also very knowledgeable, community is very educated, and community is also very aware of the dangers of the pandemic and of the disasters. And hence, they also need to be aware of all the issues so that they can also take a considered decision. The scientists and the other stakeholders of disaster risk reduction, they should act together, supporting the government and nations in implementation of the state-of-art preventive measures and communication of the available knowledge to the public to protect the society from recurrent extreme natural disasters, which keep coming day by day. And in this, what has happened is there has been a huge impact on the education sector, and which has significantly impacted and disrupted the higher education sector as well, and which is a very critical determinant of a country's economic future. So the pandemic has transformed the centuries-old teaching method, and hence, in a sense, the research and lessons learned method. So this disruption in the delivery of education is pushing the policymakers to figure out how to drive engagement at a scale which ensures inclusive e-learning solutions and tackling the digital divide. So a multi-pronged strategy is required to manage the crisis and build a resilient feedback system. Towards this end, NIDM has set up a center of virtual university network of India's universities and institute network for disaster risk reduction, which we will be talking about on 16th as one of the agenda points. So today the whole issue is how do we transform this lessons and this experience into future course of action. So lessons learned and case study method has been found to be the most effective. The case studies, they capture the what has happened, whether good or bad, and what should have been done, what could have been done, and the constraints, and relating them to the constraints, because being idealistic is not a good case study, because ideally everyone would like to have earthquake-proof housing. But is it realistic that we have it in a span of 1 year? No. So pragmatic case studies, which has taken realistic assumptions and parameters, and bringing out the future course of action at all levels, whether it be at government level, whether it be at state levels, district level, community level, self-help groups, the civil society organizations. So such case studies are important so that they can transform all such disasters into opportunities. And the most important part of the whole thing is that these documents, they need to be read, they need to be understood, they need to be debated. And thereafter, the existing procedures, standard operating procedures and policies at all levels need to be modified. So unless this loop is closed, we are again going to have similar challenges as earlier because we have not taken note of the case studies and the lessons learned, which someone painfully has worked out for us and given us on a platter, and we choose to ignore it. So today's webinar is basically to draw attention to this particular fact that we must take note of all the disasters, we must analyze all the disasters, and we must then bring out realistic, pragmatic lessons learned, oblique future course of action, or a framework which each stakeholder can do. And it is incumbent upon the stakeholders to go through that the lessons learned or the case study and debate it and modify themselves, so that it does not just become one more book on the shelf. So with this, I will end my introductory remarks, because we have eminent speakers who are coming after me and we're keen to hear them. The participants are requested to ask whatever questions they want to ask or their comments in the chat box, so that they will be addressed accordingly. Thank you so much, and over to you, Anil Khater.
Thank you, sir, for providing your insights on the Honorable PM's 10-point agenda on DRR. Definitely more awareness apropos of the 10-point agenda is required, as these are importance of Sendai framework, sustainable development goal, as well as Paris Agreement, and provides directions to address all the unprecedented challenges of disasters on communities, development, and prosperity. Now, I would request Sri Kamal Kishore, member NDMA, to enlighten us through his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. General Bindal, Professor Sharma, Dr. Surya Prakash, Mr. Kathait, and colleagues and friends from NIDM and NDMA. I am delighted to be here with you this morning to discuss the PM's 10-point agenda 9. I am also going to speak in the first technical session. And also this is my 33rd or 34th webinar since the lockdown, since March. So a lot of the times my ideas get mixed up, from this webinar, what I'm supposed to speak here, I speak somewhere else and so on. So I will spare you a long opening speech because I'm sure many of you also have had many webinars. We will discuss the substance in the technical session. I just want to make 3 points. The first point I want to make is what General Bindal alluded to in his opening remarks while talking about referring to Dr. Mishra's speech yesterday. So indeed, I don't think we can look at the lessons learned from disasters or turning disasters into opportunity without looking at other agenda points of PM's 10-point agenda. For example, if I remember correctly, one of the agenda points is on risk assessment. So if you don't have good risk assessment, how do you build back better after disasters? You will rebuild the same risk. There is one agenda point which talks about enhancing the participation of women. So how do you build back better if you do not enhance the participation of women in the recovery program? What kind of lessons would you learn if you leave out half the population that gets affected, or more than half the population that gets affected, which is women? So even though General Bindal said that there will be a final seminar bringing all of these together, I would encourage ourselves to, while we keep the focus on agenda point 9, laterally we should bring in insights from the other agenda points as well. Some of those have already been discussed in other webinars over the last week or so. So that's my first point. My second point is that when we talk about learning lessons or building back better or documenting lessons, turning disasters into opportunities, the key question to ask is who's learning lesson and who's applying it. So it is not just about us. We really have to have an approach where we talk to people who are affected by disasters. People who are affected by disasters are not victims. They are survivors. They are the principal drivers of recovery. So they have to really be in the driving seat. The most important resource in a post-disaster situation is not the money that the government provides or international agencies provide resources. It's the affected people and their initiative, their local knowledge, their resourcefulness, which is the most important thing. So I think keeping that in mind is very important, that we really look at what is it that people who are affected think, what are the lessons they have learned, and really keep them at the center of this conversation. The third thing is that when we talk about learning lessons or building back better, turning disasters into opportunity, we have to talk about it not just in physical terms, but also socio-economic terms as well. For example, after the Latur earthquake of 1993, the government of Maharashtra at that time came up with a very interesting innovation that the title of the reconstructed house was in the name of both man and the woman, and not the traditional way of just, title goes to the so-called head of the household, which is a man. Now, once you make a practice like that, where it's jointly owned by man and woman, the couple, then it's tremendously empowering from a gender perspective. So it is not about physical reconstruction of house, but basically making changes in the socio-economic systems which bring about greater equality, etc. So I think these are the three things I want to reiterate again, that while focusing on 9, look at the interconnections with others. Don't leave it only till the last seminar, because some of these things already have been discussed. The second point, keep the people in mind, people at the center. We have to learn lessons from their perspective, not only from the perspective of outsiders. And number 3, not just learning in physical sense, not just learning how a building could have been built to withstand a disaster, but also see how can we build a better society, more resilient society in a holistic sense. With that, thank you very much, and I look forward to engaging with you later during the day.
Thank you very much, sir, for enlightening us. For build back better after any disaster event, we need better understanding of which caused that event, and also to establish overcome those events in future, as well as participatory approach will definitely provide an edge in drafting these policies guidelines. That's all for the inaugural session. At outset, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our dignitaries of inaugural session, Sri Kamal Kishore, Member NDMA, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, BSM Executive Director NIDM, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division NIDM, for their guidance and setting the context of this webinar through their respective experiences and knowledge. Their inputs will be elevated by our distinguished speakers in technical session. Now we move ahead for our technical session. Before I introduce our first speaker, there are some instructions to the participants. Attendance will be automatically generated, and 60% attendance is compulsory to be eligible for the certificate. Interaction, discussions, question answer session will be after the presentations of all the speakers. Participants who have any query can share through Q&A box. Now I request our first speaker of the day, Dr. D. Datta, Advisor and Head National Geospatial Program, that was formerly known as Natural Resource Data Management System, Department of Science and Technology, to enlighten us through his talk. Over to you, sir. Dr. Datta, are you there?
Yeah, it was not, you have to unmute me, yeah.
Okay.
It was not unmuted here. Good morning, Major General Bindal, Kamal Kishore ji, Dr. Surya Prakash, Dr. Anil, and the other participants. So I think today's the focus is on the point number 9 of Honorable Prime Minister's recommendations for disaster risk reduction, which is the ensure the opportunity to learn from the disaster is not wasted. All of you, who are participating and in the, the player in this disaster management, and subsequently the adoptions of the Sendai framework, the transformations of the paradigm shift of this relief and response.
Excuse me, sir.
Your mitigations on other way. Hello.
Your video as well as voice is not clear.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but your video is not clear.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, sir, I can hear. Your video is not clear.
Video is not clear.
Yeah.
Because my fault. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's okay.
Was inside. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay.
These are all the new learnings in a new normal situation. So sorry. So what I was talking about, that today's the focus is on the point number 9 of Honorable Prime Minister's recommendation, that's ensuring the opportunity to learn from a disaster which is not wasted. So all of you, who are in these, the stakeholders of this disaster management are aware about that with the adoptions of the framework, the entire this disaster management paradigm has shifted from relief and response, and then to more and more towards the preparedness and mitigations, and otherwise in the disaster risk reduction. But in a country like India, many of you, as I see from the chat box, are the real players on the field. That still we have a lot to cover. So in this context, I will basically try to look at it from the point of view of the science and technology, how we can strengthen that the learning from the disaster event over the long term as well as the immediate impact. Someone has told that the disaster can serve as the laboratories for understanding the physical and the social factors governing them. We can gather valuable information, and following a disaster, it can help the policy and the practices to reduce the risk and loss of life, property, and the natural resources. So this is very important to look into the disasters, immediate as well as the long-term impacts, and the post-disaster study should be conducted so that the lessons can be learned at all phases. All of you know that, and I'm aware that the NIDM has, very credible way has worked towards that, and there is a, PDNA. The report is also there, post-disasters need assessment. So if we look it from the point of view of that any disaster event, it has a long-term impact as well as an immediate impact. Let us look it from our experience. With the improvement in our weather forecast technologies, our disaster preparedness definitely has improved, and it has improved this the immediate impact learning, because when in 2013 cyclone Fallon struck in Odisha, the state has successfully evacuated millions of people, avoiding a major disaster. This was a learning came out of the and these the folk. Given our the wisdom has improved, and which we can see during this 2019, the funding when it took place, there was 1.1 million people were evacuated from 10,000 villages in Odisha. But if you see, I visited the places where Fani struck, so people were evacuated. But there was a lot of things to learn, because there was a huge, distractions of the resources, the natural resources and the physical resources. So now the learning is that from this learning, how we can predict this, and how that predictions and the knowledge can be converted into practice. If we look into the long term, in 1999 cyclone in Odisha, there was a storm surge of 5 to 6 meters, and most of the deaths which occurred was attributed to this factor. But in case of Fani, which was in 2019, the storm surge was only 1.5 meters. So, and also Fani was a rare summer cyclone, and which is followed the predicted path. So there was a science and technology component of that, but there is a management and the human angle and the other angle of that. So all of these things needs to be integrated. This is a case. There's a case often of a coastal area. Also, there is a huge impact on the urban, the life of this recurring natural disaster. As you see that the occurrence has increased during the recent times. As you see in Nisarga in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and Amphan in West Bengal and Odisha, which has shown that it is not only the areas which are near to the the coastal area, but also the the urban area needs to be relooked for this resilience. And in this context, I really appreciate that the PDNA, what the NIDM has brought, which has mainly the main elements of that is the pre-disasters context and the assessment of the disaster effects, the disaster impacts, and the recovery strategy and the determining the sector recovery needs. Among them, what I've observed is that the baseline information of the pre-disaster, the data collections was mostly based on the human-centric, interactions. But let us remember that any data of this nature and historically, when you collect, there is a big, component of that of the data management and how you store the data. And we need not only a data, we need a data infrastructure for that. A data infrastructure means, like how you store the data in a standard way so that interoperable on any platform and can be accessed by many stakeholders whenever it is needed. So, and the importance of this type of a data is its availability and the time of and the accessibility. For these reasons, there needs to be a coordinated and standardizations of this post disaster data in the country. The data should be related to physical, biological, social phenomena, which like as and the result of these disasters, numbers and the patterns of injuries and deaths, performance of the life buildings and the lifelines, and response of the individual and the organization. So as you see that this brings to the other point, like yesterday when Dr. Mishra's during the inaugural sessions, Dr. Mishra's message was read out. He spoke about that they breaking these silos, and that is probably that's another the challenge and opportunity within the government sectors, that how we can break these challenges. So the next most important thing is the post-disaster data sharing. So after you do the data acquisitions, how you can do this data sharing. So this for this data sharings, like this is it's not only a meteorological data, because if you see in the long term, you need in geological data, geophysical data, seismological data, architectural, engineering related data, biological, sociological, medical, the personal's data. All this needs to be integrated. And in here, the role of the science and technology based research becomes more important, and which addresses the PDNS, the assessment of disasters and the disaster effects and the impacts. There is already, like PDNA has covered this, but this needs to be strengthened. And for example, under this this National Geospatial Program, or which RDR was NRDMS, in response to the Rishikesh, the disasters. Immediately there was a huge, the study took place from Rishikesh to the Devaprayag sections. The vulnerability maps at 1:10,000, the scale, the large scale networking was developed. There was a geometric, kinematic, and dynamic analysis at the field observations. So the slope stability analysis was done. There was a GIS framework was developed, and the probabilistic approach for the risk assessment was. But when we tried to integrate that with the the district disaster management authority, we found that there are a lot of incompatibility and the interoperable the issues with the data. So what I suggest that thinking that this requirement, and if you see that the most of the disasters during their the post stage, whether in a short term, in a long term, has a huge spatial aspects, because it affects the spatial area, it covers the spatial area, and the people are their evacuations also have a huge spatial aspects. So considering that, as you know, that the UN group of there is an UN group of geo informations management and experts group. They have a component of the disaster risk reductions, which again in alignment with the uh, Sendai framework. We from the Department of Science and Technology under NGS have started a program on the spatial disaster risk reductions, and I propose that we work together with the NIDM, the NIDM, with the IMD, and the Department of Space to strengthen the PDNA with this constant, the interactions. The Department of Science and Technology, with its mandate, can support the front end, the research issues in these areas, which will strengthen these disaster effects and disaster impacts part, and the data, the new methodology of this post-disasters data collections and the data sharing, the data infrastructure development for this post-disaster, post-disasters data, the impact, and this can strengthen the field level, the field level practice of the disaster management, which will with the more and more strengthening of the disaster risk reductions, which I believe the performance at the national level should be better for this disaster management. Thank you very much. Any questions from your side? And I invite all of you, the players in this disaster management, to coordinate and collaborate with us so that we can bring in relevant knowledge to this domain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing what DST is doing in the field of disaster management. You rightly mentioned that improvement in our early warning system for weather since Odisha cyclone of 1999 has enhanced our capacity to save lives in the event of cyclone. But still, we need to enhance our technology tactics to reduce the devastation of our infrastructure and structure. PDNA is a very useful tool in rebuilding the area affected by any disasters. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Now, I would request Sri Mihir Bhatt, Director, All India Disaster Mitigation Institute, Ahmedabad, to enlighten us through his talk. Over to you, sir.
My greetings to all the participants, Bindal sir, Surya Prakash ji, Kamal Kishore ji, Vinod ji. Thank you very much for inviting All India Disaster Mitigation Institute to this very important session, something which is very timely. I'm also very happy to see NDMA and NIDM taking this up jointly, because that gives far greater strength to this particular aspect of disaster related responses, recovery and rehabilitation. What I've been asked by Surya Prakash ji is to focus on examples where we have actually learned from disasters and implemented that learning and have moved ahead. Some sort of a success story, if you will. And so that's what I've been asked to do, and I'm going to do that. To do that, we have to be specific. So I'm going to focus on Gujarat earthquake, which is some time ago, so gives us a perspective. And I'm also going to focus on what is it that we learned from that, which we have actually implemented over a period of time. And I'll give you 5 or 6 items. The list is longer. But I will also then tell a few things which we haven't learned and we are still struggling to learn, to give us a proper perspective about what are the things on our agenda. To do that, I'm looking at 3 sources. One is the UNDP review of Gujarat earthquake, and we were very happy to join that team and actually work. I'm also going to draw from the Disaster Emergency Committee work that was evaluated, 14 to 17 international INGOs, some of the best working there, and what came out, the lessons from that. And third, I'm going to look at the review of some of the international civil society organizations and UN organizations individually had reviewed and evaluated, where we were part of that. So that's the source from where I'm taking this examples. I'm sure there are many more, but this is my take on that. One of the first thing which comes to the mind, and this has to do with Gujarat earthquake, but also in the background is Orissa earthquake. Having Orissa set up an authority at a state level, there was a demand for a national authority and an act which should actually be enacted and put together. And we have an example, obviously, that National Disaster Management Authority was set up subsequently, and a lot of experience of the previous two authorities has gone in the formation of that particular authority. So that is something very concrete that we can mention. The second is we at that time had National Center for Disaster Management, and Vinodji was a member of that and was leading that. And there was a demand to give it a far more power, far more resources, far more outreach than it had at the time. And there was a need to turn that center into something more like an institution. And look and behold, after these many years, we have NIDM come into being. And that is something very nice to see, that from a center, we became a whole institutionalized, which is part of the Act of Parliament and is performing its duties all across the states and across the country. So that's another lesson that we learned, that you need an institution like that, and we have actually implemented. The third is, at the time, we had pointed out that there has to be some minimum standards. Not that there were not, there were standard, there were relief standards, relief measures, but they needed to be updated and seen more in a comprehensive manner than droughts and floods, which was a general practice. And eventually, we have very clear implementation of sphere standards, and civil society has taken up. And now we see more and more state authorities also buying into the joint action between civil society and government authority to have some minimum standards. Also, the way of implementing these standards have been taken up. So that's a good example, and credit goes to Sphere to actually take it further consistently and for such a long time. The next example, and which Kamalji already has mentioned, is that we had recommended and actually did a large exercise of reaching out to more than some 300 villages at the time in Gujarat earthquake, that what is it that the earthquake affected population wants? What is the demand side, not the supply side, in terms of what they want in terms of recovery, economic, social, psychological, about housing, for example. And that idea at the time was quite ridiculed, and said that you can't possibly ask them, that's impossible. And eventually that has taken roots, and the good example would be recent work by UNICEF and Sphere in Kerala, to have more than, I am told, 14,000 families across the state were consulted about how will they like to have the recovery process unfold at a state, at a district level, panchayat level. And it has almost become a standard practice to consult the affected population subsequently. So that is a big achievement. That something which was at the time thought was impossible and was not needed has now become a regular part. I think same thing has also been looked at more carefully by for a smaller groups, such as Save the Children, for example, has looked at affected to the children affected and what do they want. World Vision, for example, has looked at to the affected population again. There are lots of examples that we can go, but that is now very central to any disaster response. The other thing which was pointed out in that review as a lessons learned, that we have to try harder to make sure that certain sections of our society who are being left out, needs to be included far more aggressively, far more actively, persistently. And these groups include Dalits and tribals and ethnic minorities, ethnic groups, etc., etc. And at the time, there was a belief and there was an argument that every disaster victim has to be treated equally. You can't really separate one against the other. And look and behold, slowly it was accepted. And now we have within the civil society very active Dalit watch looking at what happens to Dalits and tribals in terms of Gujarat earthquake, in terms of their inclusion in the process. And that is being pursued and pushed far more actively than it was done before. The next thing was, if you remember Gujarat earthquake, a large number of tribal construction workers from Kutch walked back to the tribal belt in Gujarat, migrant workers that we have just discovered as a nation as far as pandemic is concerned. And they were pointed out that this is a large group of migrant workers, displaced people, and how do we address people who are not really rooted or resident to the local area, and how do we reach out to them? And that is something we haven't done much subsequently. And we see that for the first time in the pandemic, efforts are being made to reach out to them. It's difficult, not so easy, not so successful, but great efforts are made to actually reach out to them. So that's something we learned a lesson we didn't quite implement, and this is what has happened. A lot of work was at the time done on school safety, and quite successfully that has been taken up as a national program from then Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, subsequently. And we see that various state governments have also taken it up very seriously, and large number of schools, public and private, are being disaster prepared, risk prepared, and there is a whole pedagogy of how do you do that that has been actually developed in India. So that lesson has very well picked up, thanks to organizations such as Save the Children, Plan International, of course, UNICEF and others. So that's an area which is very important where things have picked up. There was another area where there was far more work was needed, and it was with the government Geo-Ngo coordination. And that was a tricky part, that how do you work with NGOs? Who is their representative? How do you work out the details about working with them? And that idea has taken up, lessons has learned. And now in so many states, we have interagency group, for example, working well. Some needs far more help than they have so far. And in Kerala, again, for example, we saw that they worked very closely together with the state authorities. In Assam, they worked very closely with the state authority. UP, for example, they work quite closely with the state authority and have been actually able to address the needs of the affected population far better than if both of them had worked separately and independently. So these are the areas where we can go into more detail, maybe in the question that things have actually worked and worked better in terms of lessons learned and implemented. Some lessons which we are still struggling to learn, I'll quickly list them and stop. And one lesson is, how do you deal with the small businesses? In Bhuj, for example, we had worked with, and in the evaluation, very clearly said that the small micro enterprise needs very special attention. They need to be addressed more directly. And that is something that we haven't done enough. And now in the pandemic, we see a large effort to finance the recovery and application of small and medium enterprises to do that. The other area was to look at double disaster. If you remember, Gujarat earthquake was also Gujarat drought period. So it was a double disaster, what is called cascading uncertainty. And that is something we wasn't picked up well, that how do you deal with districts and cities? We are facing double disaster simultaneously. And that is something which is being picked up now because of the COVID and Amphan cyclone, COVID and Nisarg cyclone in Bombay. And we are trying to find ways of dealing with double disaster simultaneously. So that's another area where we can do far more work than we have done in terms of implementing the lesson. And the last point in terms of where we can do better is the social protection. And it was very clearly mentioned in those reviews, the lessons was learned that where there is a social protection, impact of disaster is less and recovery is faster. And we still don't have a universal social protection coverage for disaster victims or people at large. And that is something we need to work far more clearly and actively to implement the risk that is being faced. So these are the areas where far more work can be done in implementing the lessons learned. And those were the areas where the lessons learned are implemented. And we saw actually that we made progress. So I'd like to sum up again by saying that two ideas which were totally unacceptable during the Gujarat earthquake. One is the earthquake is a transformative experience, and NIDM and NDMA today has put the that is actually accepted. And second, the disaster is no time to learn. It's time to do and implement, and these kind of things shouldn't be brought into the picture. Was a way to look at it then. And now we've done. We have understood that time is a terrible thing to waste. Money is a terrible thing to waste. Experience is even more terrible to waste if we do that. Thank you. With this, I'd like to end. And thank you for this opportunity. Any questions are welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. Sharing your experiences of Gujarat earthquake and highlighting the importance of institutional setup for disaster management, and as well as implementations of policies, guidelines, a purpose of disaster management. And the most important, to focus on what is the need of local communities to recover and stand after disaster. Thank you very much, sir. Active participation of participants is utmost important in success of any event. First, I request participants to raise their query through question and Q&A box and gain from this opportunity to learn from our experts. The next expert is Professor V.K. Sharma, Vice Chancellor, Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, and he will be sharing his state-level experiences apropos of the webinar theme. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anilji, and I once again compliment NIDM and NDMA for this series of webinar on this important topic, that Prime Minister's 10-point program. And as I mentioned earlier, that this is very thought out 10 points, and I also agree with Shri P.K. Mishra ji that they should not be taken separately or in silos. In fact, it is just like your SDG, 17 SDGs, and they are interlinked, they are connected to each other. So same thing is these 10 points, which is covering almost everything, every aspect of disaster risk reduction. And but I think discussing it separately is also very important. So that's why I am very happy that NIDM is doing this exercise. And I'm so glad that more than 800 people have joined this program, and most of them are students who want to learn about disaster risk reduction and want to know, that what is Sendai framework, what is Sustainable Development Goals, what is Paris Agreement, how this Prime Minister's 10-point program is important for the nation, how it is important, for our officers, how it is important for the state and common men. So I'm so glad. And I think NIDM has already done it, the disaster converting into opportunity. So I think this is the best thing which you have done, that in COVID time, I think this is more than 50 webinar you have converted. And in normal training, I have seen 20, 25, 30 participants. Now you are catering, need of 800, 900 participants, students who will be unable to come to Delhi from south or from any other part of the country. they are listening to experts like Mihir Bhatt ji and Kamal Kishore ji and so many other people, which is impossible for these students to listen. So I think this is first thing which NIDM has done, that you have converted this disaster into opportunity for people for awareness. And the most important awareness is knowing, that how we are working. What is Sindai framework basically? What is Prime Minister's vision? Friends, this topic, which is given by Honorable Prime Minister, this is his own experience in Gujarat. And I think my friend Mihir Bhatt very rightly said the experience of Gujarat, that Gujarat was one of the pioneer actually in having the act, state act was prepared before the National Disaster Management Act. There are high-powered committee and Mihir Bhatt and his team, they gave us so many suggestions. And one of these things was this, that how we have, disaster after disaster. There is flood, there are droughts, and then after the disaster, we wait for another disaster. We never do learning. And if we learn some lessons, then we never implement that. So I think this, he very rightly said that what are the lessons which is learned by the community, by the non-governmental organizations, civil societies, and how they have implemented it in different disasters. I am also working in Sikkim, and I will give my own experiences. I think before I start this, I will say that two politicians I have seen who saying this thing, that this is a big disaster, but we will convert it into opportunity. First was Shri Sharad Pawar ji. He was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, 93 Latur earthquake, and I am having the cutting, of a newspaper that Chief Minister said that this was a very big disaster for the state. We are affected. For the first time, Maharashtra government took loan from World Bank for rehabilitation, for reconstruction. But he said that I will convert this into opportunity for Maharashtra, and I will be having a strong Maharashtra. The Build Back Better, this slogan came with the Sindai framework. And maybe it is learning from this kind of experiment which India did. After that, it was Gujarat earthquake. And in Gujarat earthquake, I also see that Shri Narendra Modi, who is our Honorable Prime Minister, he was the Chief Minister, and he thought that let us take it as an opportunity for Gujarat, and not only for Gujarat, maybe a showcase for the country, and then do development accordingly. The examples which is given by Mihir Bhai, I fully agree with him that the total, more than 300 villages affected, all cities, including Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar, everywhere, it was affected. But I think there was, they took it as a mission that we will develop Gujarat, which is more stronger. And in case there is a disaster or earthquake in this region, because that part is seismic zone 5, so naturally, this area or these houses, these structures will never be affected. The reconstruction was owner driven. And this slogan came for the first time that owners should be given, owners should be given the power. They should be empowered actually. They should be given the knowledge that what is earthquake resistant features. And I think this beginning was made by Gujarat. And not only this, there are, many things, which can be learned from Gujarat experience. And Mir Bhai has touched a very important point, that is the coordination aspect. I think this is always lacking. Whenever we have any lesson learning, I think I have done about 10 learning exercise. And in every exercise, I think we are saying the same thing, that the coordination is lacking. So I think the coordination not only between government and non-governmental organization, but there are many stakeholders, including the victims, including the people who are affected. And that's why the community-based disaster risk reduction or community-based management, I think that was given the priority. Friends, when I was learning disaster management, 93, I organized a workshop for relief commissioners in IIPA, Indian Institute of Public Administration. I invited, ADPC and my very good friend, late Terry Jagal. He came and he took one session only on disaster and development. And he gave, one slide which is there in the UNDMT training module, and many people might be showing you, but I love this slide. It is saying that the vulnerability, the the development which you are doing in area, this may increase the vulnerability, this may decrease the vulnerability. Then the two other points were that develop this disaster, whenever there is a disaster, it is stop development. You can see now there is COVID, and you can see that there is our economy is in minus, and development is almost stopped. Now we are trying to, revive this. So every disaster, not only this, I think every disaster, it may be flood, it may be, and we have seen that in last 6 months, not only this COVID, we had 2 cyclones, we have floods, 8, 9 states, we have droughts, at the same time. And these are the things, which are, so now in this kind of situation, how you can convert it into an opportunity for right kind of development. So I think, what lessons we can learn, because this is not the last pandemic. Maybe WHO chief is saying that we should be prepared, for another pandemic or any this kind of infection. Or so I think we learn this thing, that how we will maintain hygiene, how we will maintain, the distance between the, because in case it continues for some time, definitely, we will have to have a culture of this preparedness. And this culture is required, basically. And we will have to learn this from this COVID. I'm coming to my point that Anil was saying that we invited Professor Sharma because he will give some state experience. In fact, I am working in Sikkim, which is one of the smallest state. But when I got this opportunity in 2012, that they nominated me as vice chairman of Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, I thought that whatever I learned or whatever I was teaching, in my classes, that I will do in Sikkim. And I tried to do. I'm not saying that we completely reform this thing, disaster risk reduction there, or we are, but I tried to, whatever we learned from Gujarat, whatever we learned from Odisha, whatever we learned from Maharashtra, I tried to do something, in the state. And I was very lucky that I got full support from bureaucracy, I got full support from the politicians, and they said that, yes, I think let us do something to make the state as a model. So I'm saying that we did a couple of things. One is the reconstruction which we did. Because you know that 2011 there was an earthquake. Our whole secretariat, which is the most critical building, most important building in the state, that was affected. So we made the, secretariat, new secretariat. We were also having, all in rural areas, rural houses, more than 8,000 houses were collapsed. In urban areas, we had the same thing, many houses collapsed, many schools, hospitals. But I think we thought that this is one opportunity, and we are, spending taxpayers' money. So this taxpayers' money should be well spent. And I think the first decision of the government was that the list of beneficiary will not be prepared by the officers. This will be prepared by the panchayats. And you will not believe that all the panchayats, they gave the name of the beneficiaries, that these are the people who are the affected one, and their whole house is collapsed. So we made this list, and there was absolutely no conflict. Everybody agreed. Immediately the order was given that these houses should be made on priority basis. The second decision was that it should be honor driven, which we learned from Gujarat, which we learned from other places, that it should be honor driven. Honor should be involved, in the whole process. We took help from IITs, and I am grateful that about 4 overseers and engineers, they ask us to, that your masons should be trained, because in case you have a good design, in case you have all these things, and you cannot construct it, how you will do it? So the module was prepared by the IITs, and we gave masons training. Thanks to our civil society, that some people from Dehradun, Uttarakhand, some people from Nepal, they came and they helped us in the mason training. And I'm very happy to say that today we have more than 3,000 certified masons who are trained actually, who went to Nepal after Nepal earthquake, and they did the reconstruction there. They got good money because they were the trained people. They speak Nepali, so there was no language problem, and we did that. Next thing we did is that transparency. My friend, Mehir was saying that always, the people used to criticize government, that they have not done it, they have done this, they have did this favor to this man. So one MIS based, platform was created, and whatever information available, the list of beneficiary, their telephone number, how much money was given to them, how much, and the money was given in 4 installments, and start from the beginning till end. You can see it sitting in Delhi. In Planning Commission, I was going with this, software, and I was showing to them that this is the progress in Sikkim. I gave several presentations to different authorities that this is the progress, and we want to finish the whole reconstruction within 4 or 5 years. And we did it. Next thing is that mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction. We are talking a lot, but nobody is doing it. Because in states, the problem is that nobody wants to, share power with others. In Sikkim, with the help of the Chief Secretary, with the help of the Honorable Chief Ministers, I think I'm fairly successful in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction. You go to rural development department, and they will tell you, what are the issues in reconstructions, what are the issues, and they were having full database. They are having this software. So in fact, the entire reconstruction was done by the Rural Development Department. All schools, they were reconstructed by Education Department. We provided them. Yeah, I'm finishing in 2 minutes.
Thank you.
So we gave money, to different sectors, to agriculture, to school, to hospital, health department, and they did the entire work. So this kind of mainstreaming, we will be able to do in Sikkim. So those days, it was not built back better, but I think I gave a presentation, before the Sindhi framework in Washington, and we said that Sikkim has already done it. The idea which is being floated, that there should be, built back better. So the same concept we have done in the reconstruction and rehabilitation, which was appreciated. So I stop here because there are many other people who are here, and the lessons which we have learned from the whole country and from other states, we tried to do something in Sikkim. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you so much, Anil. Over to you.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing the initiatives taken by the Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority under your guidance to strengthen the resilience of Sikkim State. Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. Ashish Kumar Srivastava, IAS, Additional Secretary to Uttarakhand Chief Minister and District Magistrate, Dehradun. He will be enlightening us about the lessons learned from disasters in Uttarakhand State. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to present my thoughts and my and we are talking about the trust of we are in coastal areas. So we are with all disaster, and we every year we struck by one or the other major disasters in Uttarakhand, and the major disaster, like in I was telling about the Prime Minister's 10-point program, and I think all programs, all points are relevant, but in my opinion, the most relevant point is the 9th point, because this suggests about learning. Whatever you learn, you implement it for future, and then you reduce the risk based on your prior experiences. And I must say here that the learning is a continuous process, so we can't say that whatever we have learned in the past will definitely help us in future, because as our learning is evolving, the type of disaster is also keep on changing. Like we were earlier doing with earthquake, we were doing with forest fire, we were dealing with industrial disaster. Our learning is evaluating traditional knowledge. Why these were not happening when people were in past 100 years back or 200 years back. So I just want to discuss some of the learning based on our experiences. In 2017, we had forest fire, the massive forest fire in the state. 2013 is well known for Kedarnath disaster, and I got this experience to work as relief commissioner in the area of Uttarkasi for Gangotri. So I learned so many things from there. 2012 was again the Asiganga flash flood. Flash flood is very common, but that was a very big flash flood. 2004 was Varnavat landslide in the same district, and I am more discussing about Uttarkashi's experience because I was district magistrate earlier there. And 1991 was the Uttarkashi earthquake. So in all those disasters, I can definitely say that the learning, there are certain learnings, and we keep on evolving, like the interdepartmental coordination, which is very important, and we have evolved a lot of system to interact with other departments. The district disaster management authority as a whole, and with the different departments, like Met department, like the monsoon season is going on, so we have a very good coordination with meteorological department. So every time after 2013 we have developed this momentum that we keep on getting daily warnings, then hourly warnings, like this system. And now, because of the 2013 disaster, earlier the districts were working in silos. Now we have started coordination between districts, because as you know that the Dehradun, Haridwar, and that side in Kumaon is Udham Singh Nagar is gateway for the hills. So these three districts are basically coordinating with the hill districts for pilgrimage and the tourist flow in the district based on weather forecast. Now, because of those fires, we started discussing on the carrying capacity of hill, whether that area is fully well acquainted with the tourism or the activities we are promoting in those areas. So this was like sometime in 2016 when the massive forest fire occurred. Earlier, the forest fire was actually thought that it is actually domain of forest department. So I must say that from 2016 we started that no, that this is also one of the major disasters, and we should deal it with our IRS system in District Disaster Management Authority. So all these things we have started learning now, because of the frequent cloud burst and massive rains. Now the state government has actually made district development authorities in all hill districts. Earlier it were only in Haridwar, Dehradun, and Nainital. So now we have district development authorities everywhere to actually to check on irregular and haphazard development in district, so that these type of disasters, so we can reduce the risk of disaster, and also we can reduce the risk of loss. So this thing we are doing here. And the another very important learning is of 2003 Varnavat landslide. I think many of you are aware that the Varnavat started. This is actually the Varnavat hill is in the heart of Uttarkashi city, the municipal limit of Uttarkashi, and it started the massive landslide started, and the whole city was in risk. So this is one of the best treatment I can say for the hill which has started landslide. So that was the time when people started actually thinking of geological study, hydro screening methodology, hydro seeding methodology, and all. So that is also right now helping us in other mitigating other landslide prone areas. And other thing is which I want to say is right now the lessons we have learned is for risk assessment, risk communication, and mass awareness. Now we have our disaster response team in every villages. So this is the thing we have done through capacity building. So we have a very robust and redundant communication system right now in our state. So now, because of 2013 disaster, so aerial access we have made very frequent. Many helipads and all were constructed so that we can respond. We can reduce the time of response. So we can utilize actually the concept of golden hour. Now we have almost plan and SOP for and regular mock drills for all type of disasters. before like this surge started in COVID, we have a mock drill in month of April when there was lockdown for if the cases will surge, then what will happen? So now earlier we were thinking that we have when we thought that we have become wiser, the next disaster struck, which is COVID-19, and now as a district we are dealing a lot with COVID. So COVID is one disaster which I can say that it includes almost all aspects of human life, almost all. So like in a capital city where the flow is too much, people used to come here. We in Dehradun we have many central government organizations, offices. Now the state government seat is Dehradun. So this was a bigger challenge for us to implement the lockdown, and after lockdown when unlock is going on, it is also equally challenge for us to track the people who are coming here from outside and those who came in contact with the positive patients to become high risk. So all those things, right now we have maximum number of cases in Dehradun if we consider entire state. This is the thing. If you see the COVID crisis in today, we have completed actually 6 months of COVID. First case reported on 5th of March, 15th of March, and today is 15th of September. So we have completed almost 6 months, and in that 6 months, the biggest challenge, because the challenge in this disaster and other disaster is that other disaster actually come for a time, for a definite time, 1 hour, half an hour. Some are the earthquake is in minutes or second. But this is a disaster which is continuing, and we don't know when it is going to finish. And the biggest challenge is to motivate the entire team, which is working tirelessly from last 6 months. So because earlier disaster is that the disaster has happened, and after that you are actually doing the relief work. Here actually disaster is going on and the relief work is also going on simultaneously. So this is one of the biggest differences. So migration from the city and migration from outside Uttarakhand to Uttarakhand. So because of the geography of Uttarakhand, Dehradun and Haridwar were the nodal area where people were coming, and then to stop the spread in city in hills, we thought that we should keep each and everyone in Dehradun and Haridwar for quarantine and the checking for the tests. So that was the thing which we have done. So the entire team has worked tirelessly, and I think there are many lessons from this COVID thing, and I am quite confident that technology is going to play a very important and vital role in our lives, in our working everywhere post COVID. Actually, nobody was actually thinking to have webinars so frequently on earlier it was like seminars. Right now is webinar. So that was the thing we have done to make one or two things. Just I want to tell in a minute, and I want to finish after that. So here we have done like a Dehradun is a smart city. So we have actually started locating the people who are coming from outside and those who are positive patients through our geolocator. So we can actually track if the person who is quarantined or isolated is moving outside in the city or the district or not. So that is one thing we have done. And another thing, in the month of June, we started doing this weekend lockdown. And after that, it was actually adopted by many cities and many states, this weekend lockdown. So I think we and Odisha started together on the same day, and after that it was adopted by many other states. So that is the thing. The biggest the most important thing which we have learned from COVID is that how to motivate your staff, because we don't know how long it is going to actually stay. So that is the thing which we are learning, and I must say, I must compliment you, all of you, NDMA, that you have started you are discussing this topic, the ninth topic, which I think is the one of the most important topics in the 10 points. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think I am on time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for providing insight on disaster risk reduction from Uttarakhand state and highlighting the importance of learning from the disaster to reduce the impact of forthcoming unpleasant events, and also inclusion of national wisdom and cross-sector, cross-department coordination in devising the action plan for disaster risk reduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division, Ministry of Disaster Management, to enlighten us from his talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. Anil, please give me that sharing link. Share.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, most of the speakers from the state and the district level has already spoken about their experiences. I'll share NIDM's experiences. NIDM has been given a mandate under the Disaster Management Act 2005. And as per the provisions under the Act, we have been carrying out some activities related to this particular goal. Am I audible, Anil?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. And this was a time when Prime Minister agenda was declared in the first post-Sendai Asia Ministerial Conference in November 2006 to 5th. And these are the 10 points that have been listed, which I would just mention for the information for the delegates. That the first was all development sectors must imbibe principles of disaster risk management. Second was work towards risk coverage for all, starting from households to small, medium and large enterprises to multinational corporation and to the national and states. Third was encourage greater involvement and leadership in disaster risk management. Fourth was invest in risk mapping globally. Fifth was leverage technology to enhance efficiency of our disaster risk management. And the sixth one was develop a network of universities to work together on disaster issues. Seventh was utilize the opportunities provided by social media and mobile technologies. Eighth was on build on local capacity and initiatives. Ninth was opportunity to learn from a disaster must not be wasted. That's what we are doing today. And 10th is bring about greater cohesion international response to disasters. So just for the information, Dr. Ashish Srivastav just told you about Varnavat landslide. This is a photograph just before the landslide happened on 25th September 2003. It was taken. And this was the situation on the next day, 26th September 2003. So you can see what kind of consequences a disaster can bring about. As Dr. Ashish Srivastav told, the district headquarters is very close to this and is located within the city, and national highway, strategic road, all the buildings, including the government buildings, colony, and the private buildings were affected adversely by these landslides. So this was a big lesson that how we can, in between amongst our all authorities and existing line departments, we can get affected. And there was a PWD building in Mizoram, which fell on other private buildings and caused disaster. And which were actually known and could be assessed by any geologist. And that's why in Varnavat, we didn't have any casualty because it was being monitored and it was informed to the administration and people were evacuated. However, in this particular case in Aizol, they could not be. So we have to learn lessons that wherever we have the potential disasters, to inform the public and we make them alert and warn them. Another incident of 18 children getting killed on 18th August 2010. So many things have happened. Now documentation, not just documenting the disaster characteristics and the event, but also that why it should be kept in our memories, because the ignorant children between the age of 4 to 10 years, they went to the school for learning and they got killed under a landslide. So we should keep such memorials, not only documenting in the physical papers or the documents or the report or proceedings. It should be a field. It should be field documentation. It should be kept as a memorial in the memory of those children who were lost, who became victim of such a disaster. And documentation should not be just a paperwork, but a physical and social learning also. As per Act, these are some of the responsibilities where it is listed under Section 42, Chapter 7, subsection 8. The documentation is very, very important, has to be carried out by NIDM for development of information based, and also including the lessons learned into policies, guidelines, prevention, mitigation measures. And also NIDM to undertake research on this aspect. Documentation not just for the purpose of recording the information, but also carrying out research, why this has happened and how we could have averted it or prevented or mitigated this is also part of the documentation research work by NIDM. And developing our education training materials are based on those documentation studies. And I would just mention for the information of our delegates that NIDM has been carrying out right from its beginning. When the National Center for Disaster Management was there, it started with Odisha super cyclone in 1999. There were turning points in the disaster management field: drought in Rajasthan, Gujarat earthquake. That earthquake documented by none other than Dr. P.K. Mishra, and it was by NIDM. Situation analysis of Kumkolam fire. So similarly, Bihar floods, Munshari floods, Leh floods, Kapkot landslide, which I just mentioned, Sikkim earthquake in 2011, 18th September. It was well studied in the field and also documented with roadmap for resurrection, not only reconstruction. And then Uttarakhand floods, but these were precursor events which had happened even before the Uttarakhand tragedy took place in 2013. And I'll show you some of those photographs, which were actually lessons to be taken from 2012 incident, which happened in Bhagirathi River Valley at Asiganga. If we had learned from them, we may not have had that amount of tragedy which happened in June 2013. Violent cyclone, many cyclones we have studied: Gaja cyclone, Oki cyclone, Philin cyclone, then others, many other cyclones up to Fani cyclone, and now Amphan cyclone in 2020. Malin landslide, Nepal earthquake. We are not just working within the national territories, even across the country. Also, where our people are going or experts are going, they are documenting those lessons, and we are conducting those workshops and recording all those lessons learned by different sectors and different experts. Chennai floods, Kuttingal temple fire, not only the natural hazards, but also the hazards caused by anthropogenic interventions or activities. Kerala floods, Fani, COVID-19 pandemics. It is being documented, and NIDM is producing those documents and also recording that how the other phenomena which are affecting the occurrences, as Dr. Ashish Srivastava said, they are varying with nature. Not only evolution in terms of our lessons learned, but evolution in the terms of nature of the disaster characteristics. And Leh is one area which is high altitude desert, suffered from high intensity rainfall and flash flood in August 2009. And this is recorded. And you can see how they have to change. They have to learn that their sun-baked bricks they were building houses are not good enough. In case such rains happen, all that will get dissolved and their houses will be demolished. And their muddy situation in which response even becomes difficult. Munshari area in Uttarakhand in 2009. 10, this has happened. 10, I don't remember exactly the year. And we went and documented. Whole of the village got washed. So now what do? We learn a lesson that we cannot be safe in those locations where our tributaries are coming, which can get blocked at night and can overflow and bring lot of debris, and debris will bury all the people and the buildings along with them. And Sikkim earthquake of 18th September 2011, we felt it in Delhi also. The shaking was felt up to Delhi, almost about 2,000 kilometers away from the source of the earthquake, and the buildings fell down. So this gave us another lesson that not only we need RCC buildings or earthquake resistant designs, but also their slope stability on the ground location where they are sited should also be the safe. So it is very much a lesson for after the Sikkim earthquake, which need to be considered. Professor Vinod Sharma told that even the Secretariat had suffered. So why did such buildings, which are important buildings, critical buildings, had to suffer in such events? And what should we do so that we should not suffer in future? So we have taken lessons, recorded them, and then informed concerned authorities. And these were the situations I'm showing. Now I'm showing you the instance of 2012. This hotel was shown falling into the river by TV and other media. And this is Ganga Hotel. And the foundations were eroded away by the river. We are always interested in having a river view hotel. But then what are the risks associated must be well assessed. As our Honorable Member Kamal Kishore said, risk assessment is a prerequisite. Until unless you have the risk assessment, we cannot do risk reduction and bring resilience. And these are the situations. You see, this is the photograph. If you will compare it with 2013, you will find the similar consequences, the similar lessons that were learned. I had actually tackled both and found the similarities, showing 2013 also. Now, a lot of debris brought into and around Kedarnath temple area and into SSB camp downstreams. So all these are actually natural examples. Being a geologist, I've been studying about these morphodynamics of the river systems. And they are not unnatural phenomena. They are all natural and known phenomena. Only thing is we are not considerate about the process of the nature and caring for it. And always in our own greed, we are trying to cross such areas. Even personally, I had to cross this landslide, which is infamous landslide called Kalesur. During the June 2013, after the event of this Kedarnath tragedy, I was sent back. I was in Uttarakhand from 10 to 17 of June. But then in order to support the state government and the agencies, I had to cross this landslide when it was in active mode. So you see this, I crossed at 11 a.m. with my own car, and at 4 p.m. this was the situation. You can imagine if you have to cross. So if you are familiar with the phenomena, with the ground, and with the territory is very, very important to save yourself. Now this COVID-19 situation, you can see we are using our shelters for different purposes. So how we can maintain social distancing and other provisions which are required not only by the government, organized by the government, but in the private sector also, corporate sector. Mihir Bhattji said about the informal sector. So how do we manage all that? And how do we make them educated, aware, and sensitized with a conscious effort for disaster risk reduction and resilience at the community level, at the citizen levels? And they will continue to do, considering safety in terms of just wearing masks together. Now, these are some of the case studies which have been documented and reported besides the ones which I have mentioned. And all the proceedings and reports are available at NIDM website. You can go through these and take the lessons for your own purposes, whether it is earthquake, fire, or a drought, or a flood, whatever it is. So I would suggest that the efforts made by NIDM on documentation of disasters must be actually utilized as opportunities for reducing the risks. Pothingal temple fire, all these have been kept on our websites. Funny cyclone, way ahead. And we had even projects focusing on documentation only about landslide. We are creating archival records of landslides. So, and we have a center on this. So all this with different workshop we had carried out. I know the time is short, so I'll just hurriedly say that we had done fact-finding missions also, and we had recorded with the highest possible authorities involving them and getting the lessons learned from them. And all publications, not only national and even international event documentations have been well recorded by us at in national and international conferences, involving the highest authority through our journal publication, through our paper publication. So number of such publications, documents I can cite to you where we have recorded. And coordination, command and control systems are one of the major issues that have no doubt been reflected as told by my previous speakers. And I suggest not only carrying out documentation on paperwork, but also in the field like this and informing people about the characteristics of those disasters and preserving them as memorials, parks and other things, so that the lesson can also be learned by the public in general by visiting those sites. That also will be one of these documentations. And these documentation, if preserved, will also help in field learning processes. So this is what I suggest. And this has been done by many other countries. I'm not suggesting it that that's my personal suggestion. I've observed it in many other countries, which we also need to take up and create such centers and things and prevention and education centers. Many potential hazards should also be documented where people are building wrongly. And the good practices also learned from our traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge. So all this we have learned from various times, from 1991 earthquake in Uttarkashi to 2020 COVID-19 situation. One cannot handle it alone. We have to build partnerships and bring together all stakeholders. Then only we'll be able to tame these disasters and make ourselves disaster-free and resilient country. So this is Crosstone for social resilience in Japan, which I mentioned several times. And with this, I will conclude my presentation and thank you very much. Anil, over to you.
Thank you very much, sir, for putting the NIDM perspective regarding the theme of the webinar and enlightening about the PM's 10-point agenda, importance of documentation and the way documentation should be done, as well as initiatives NIDM has taken since its inception in documenting certain disasters. Now I invite Sri Kamal Kishore, member NDMA, who will be sharing his experiences and expertise at national level. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And I am back again after an hour and a half. Those were very, very good presentations. Professor Sharma, Mir Bhai's work, Dr. Surya Prakash. So I will not try to I will try to avoid repeating them. And also we are running behind schedule, so I will try to keep it brief. It's Prime Minister's Agenda Point 9. So I will basically outline 9 things to do under this Agenda Point 9. The first one is we need to do a lot more work on planning for recovery before a disaster happens. So we have contingency plans for response, we have IRS system for response, but as far as I know, none of the state disaster management plans or the district disaster management plans have thought about how recovery will take place after a disaster. Different states have improvised. In some cases, the State Disaster Management Authority becomes the nodal agency for managing recovery. In other cases, it's the line departments. And I'm not saying that we need to have a uniform system. You know, each state has its own administrative culture. So it should be free to improvise to the extent it is reasonable. And but the most important thing is that there should be planning beforehand. The second thing is that we really have to think about some activities which can be termed as quick impact projects for recovery after disasters. So, for example, if after a cyclone, if some farmers have lost their coconut plantation and their the pan ke patte, that sort of beetle nut leaves plantation and all of that. So if you provide them assistance 6 months after the event for recovery, that's 1/10 as effective as you provide it 6 days after. because the longer you wait to provide that kind of assistance, the longer they will be dependent on the external relief. So to get people quickly back on track and restore livelihoods, for that, we really have to go area by area, identify what are the quick impact projects that can be done based on past experience for restoring livelihoods. My third point is that there is a lot of discussion about what have we learned from disasters, what have we learned from disaster reconstruction programs. But one thing we really have to focus on is that when we plan for recovery, when we are rebuilding areas that have been affected by cyclone Fani or some landslide in Uttarakhand or Himachal, we really have to have an outcome-based approach to planning. So if I were to make it come alive in simple words, for example, it's not important how many classrooms are being built. What is important is how many children are going back to school. So I think we really have to look at the human development outcomes of a recovery. That brings me to an interconnected fourth point, which is the integrated planning. So a lot of the times recovery reconstruction planning is done in silos of sectors. Health doesn't talk to education, water doesn't talk to roads, water doesn't talk to power. So how do we come up with a approach which promotes integrated planning? The fifth point, which sounds obvious, and this is something I alluded to in my opening remarks, is that when we build back better, we build back better not just to the disaster that has just happened, but also the other disasters that might happen. And that really requires being ready with a multi-hazard risk assessment very quickly right after a disaster to be able to apply that for planning recovery. So in essence, I'm saying that not just building back better to disaster that has happened or the hazard event that has occurred, but also other hazards that might occur. There are examples where we reduce risk to one hazard but increase risk to another hazard, and there are also sometimes seemingly conflicting requirements for building hazard resilient standards to different hazards in a given location. So that discussion needs to happen, and that holistic approach to reducing risk to multiple hazards is required. Number 6, I will again connect that with the agenda point 3, which is role of women. I think all the committees at the village level for managing recovery, redressal, grievance redressal mechanisms at the community level, district level, should not just have women's participation. We should aim to have women's leadership of it. When people get affected in a cyclone, the kind of risks that women face are different from the kinds of risk men face. And if women are not at the table, they're not in the leadership, then those risks are likely to be ignored. And in doing this, we don't have to talk about women as vulnerable groups. Women are a group. They have some unique vulnerabilities, just as men have some unique vulnerabilities, but they also have tremendous capacities. So we really have to take a whole view and rather than just talking about it, actually show how we can do it. How I would like to see how many post-earthquake beneficiary identification committees at the village level have women as the leader, how many women participate in those this thing. So that is very important. Seventh point, which nobody referred to in the last 2 hours, is the need for doing longitudinal studies. So we are very good at doing studies of events that have happened last year, 2 years, 4 years before. but I would like to know all the stuff that we did more than 25 years ago in now 30 years ago in Latur, 28 years ago, 27, 93. So yeah, 27 years ago in Latur. What did that lead to? How did people's lives change after the Latur earthquake and the kind of reconstruction program that was launched? Because you know, while a government-aided program to restore what has been lost in a disaster may last for 3 or 5 years, it takes up to half a generation to recover from a major disaster. So it has a huge impact, not just on the current generation, but also the future generation. So it will be good to at least launch a few longitudinal studies. I would like to see what was the impact of the kind of housing we did after 1991, Uttarkashi earthquake, 1993 earthquake in Maharashtra, 1999 super cyclone, and it's not just housing, it could be other things. So I think that would be another thing. Now, 8th point, which is again the issue, is that a lot of the times we've seen after disasters, there is a focus on pushing some risk reduction measures. But those risk reduction measures in that particular location are not sustainable. You have multiple examples, you know, including in 1993 Maharashtra earthquake, where external agencies came and built houses which were extremely earthquake resistant, but those were built using technologies which were never transferred to the local masons, local contractors. As a result, when the family needs another room, they go back to building poorly the way they were building before. So I think sustainability of a risk reduction method technology is an important point. That's my 8th point. My 9th point and the final point is to strike a balance between sustainable livelihoods and disaster risk reduction. We have to take a holistic view of life. We have had examples after tsunami in many countries that were affected by tsunami where because people were scared of the experience they had had with tsunami, and there was there were many lives lost across at least 5 countries. More than 5 countries were affected, but 5 countries had major loss of lives. So there was this thing that now we will have a coastal no-build zone for 500-meter band or a 1-kilometer band. For a fisherman, if you put him 1 kilometer into the sea, you have killed his livelihood forever. So how do you, and the thing is that people's risk perception after a disaster also changes with time. If an event has occurred just yesterday or last month, the memory of that disaster is fresh, and people rate that as the most important thing, even at the cost of day-to-day livelihoods. So this is something which requires careful deliberation. There are many examples of reconstructed housing, reconstructed settlements that have been abandoned after a few years because they just do not make sense on a day-to-day basis. So I think striking a balance between disaster risk reduction and livelihood, in fact, they are not separate. They are one and the same things, but we have to take an integrated view and not just take a hazard-centric view of risk. With that, I conclude my thoughts. These are my 9 thoughts for the 9-point agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your experiences and expertise at national level. Takeaways from your talk are that we need a holistic, integrated, multi-hazard approach to help the local communities that are looking to survive the adverse impact of disaster. You also rightly highlighted the importance of women participation in DRR planning. As it is said that if you teach a man, you teach an individual, but if you teach a woman, you teach whole family. Thank you very much, sir. Now we will take few questions. This question is for Dr. D. Datta. Sir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Sir, question is, there are any standard templates for geoscientific data sharing in addition to disaster risk reduction exercise?
There is no standard template is available, but in the context of our national spatial data infrastructure experience, we have worked with the geological, geological survey of India for the geological data, but specific for the different disaster management, there is no, and there is an opportunity to develop that.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Next question is to Shri Mihir Bhatt. And question is, what really needs to be done based on lesson learned, and what kind of steps need to take to reduce the risk and prepare ourselves to be ready to face any kind of situation? Melissa, are you there?
I think he has left.
No, he's there, but he's on mute.
Okay, I'll just call him.
Hello, Melissa.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. So you got the question, or?
A very important question in terms of what is it that we can do so we are prepared. And I think, like democracy, price of disaster preparedness is eternal vigilance. If you are vigilant at every step of development process, you are always prepared for any disaster. And sort of two ways of doing that. One is to be reflective, that is from time to time see what we've done and how we are exposed to or not exposed to risk. And second, what is called risk audit, that any major activity, any major expenditure, any major project, and see that if the risk audit is done so that we do not end up actually rebuilding risk or building risk in our development project. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, sir. And this question is for Dr. Ashish Srivastava. Why risk and vulnerability assessment has not be considered as mandatory activity for district disaster management authorities?
When we make our plans for a district disaster management, like a district disaster management plan, we definitely include vulnerability, the risk assessment, everything, because that you will not be able to make your appropriate plans. So actually it is there, and in a plan we have actually very distinct chapters for these two things. So I think because this is actually the base, you can say, founding stone for making your disaster management plan. If you don't have a very good risk analysis and the vulnerability analysis, you will not be able to make it appropriately. I think I have answered the question.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And this question is for Professor Surya Prakash. Why people in Indian cities don't act proactively for flood by Central Water Commission? Every year we are seeing flood extremes like never before due to erratic rain and mismanagement of dam water.
Thank you, Anil. Actually, it's a question of aggregate responsibility, collective responsibility. As far as urban floods are concerned, it cannot be handled just by one department, because there are many departments which have to work in coherence, right? So a lot of water which used to infiltrate into the ground is no more going. It is more in terms of percentage of surface runoff. So that's why every time when we are listening about the urban floods, we say unprecedented flood or extreme floods not reported before. Because the amount of water which is available, which is overflowing our embankments or from the reservoir sites, which is being released, as well as which is flowing over the ground because of heavy precipitation in the urban areas. So the amount of intensity of the rainfall has also increased because of changing climatic conditions and the urban environmental conditions. So that is one of the driving factor. Other, which is why we are not able to control, is that we are actually having not adequate drainage disposal system. We have to have stormwater runoff systems which are not properly thought about. So until unless we'll have these stormwater runoff drainage systems available within the urban areas, the water cannot be easily and timely disposed of, so it will inundate those areas. Secondly, even those people who are living in these urban areas, they are also not properly disposing of their waters. So the drains, whatever capacities they have, also get congested because of plastics, because of solid waste which goes into those drains. So they are reducing their capacities further down. So all these things together have to be taken care. We have to clean our drainages every time before the monsoon periods to use their full capacities. And also we have now the underpasses where the water can withstand and will not flow because water flows along a gradient. So it will not automatically flow down because of gravity or the gradient. So therefore we have to have pumps to take out those water from those areas. So we have to build a appropriate system within the cities looking into the water which will be available in different amounts at different places depending on the topography, the relief conditions of those areas. So we are having very good land use urban plan, right? In urban areas, we have city plans taking care of the land use only, but not the hydrological conditions. So that should also, there should also be a plan along with land use, the hydrological management plan, water resources management plan, and flood management plan. So disaster vulnerabilities and hazards should also be considered. Then only we will be able to avoid them.
Thank you very much, sir. And the last question is for Sri Kamal Kishore ji. When we say we are learning lessons from disasters, are we not ignoring the cascading disasters which now have become more complex and frustrating? What are the methods to translate knowledge into actions at ground level to be more impactful?
I think when we are talking about learning from disasters, we have to take into account cascading disasters as well. And a lot of the work that has been done, for example, lesson learning after what happened in Cyclone Amphan. Cyclone Amphan happened at the time of COVID-19, and complexity of that has been captured. So it's not correct to say that lesson learning means only looking at just one distinct event. A lot of the times disaster events are connected. A landslide occurs, it blocks the river, it dams the river, then it creates potential for flash flood downstream. So we have to look at all of these things in an integrated way and develop different kinds of risk scenarios. A lot of these risks are very difficult to model, but we can certainly create scenarios based on the past experience and work on the basis of that. The Putkal Lake event that happened in 2015 was exactly an example of that. So many things, so many hazards come together there. Landslide, permafrost, flash flood. So we had to take an integrated view of that. So it is absolutely critical that we look at multiple hazards and how they connect with each other and increase or reduce the risk.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, which is Seva Medal Executive Director NIDM, for his concluding remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. It was a very good webinar for 2 hours in which a lot of issues were discussed there. And ultimately, the need was felt, which was also initiated by all the speakers and especially by Kamal Kishore ji, that a multi-hazard scenario should be the norm of the day. And the last question which came about cascading disasters, that also should become a part of the study. So whenever now we are talking about any disasters, we should see it in its entire cycle, because flood brings diseases, flood brings a lot of carcasses, the dead body disposal, waste management. Like now we are seeing in pandemic that medical waste management has become a huge problem, and it is floating all around the world into the sea, which are sometimes getting washed ashore. So whenever we do any lessons learned or a case study, or we study a disaster, it should be studied in its entirety till the effects of the disasters wear off and the people come back to normal. Uh, a normal cyclone. A cyclone changes the topography of a coastal district. Many new islands are created, many old islands are washed away. A number of ponds are created inside, the sand dunes are created, and hence the complete way of working of that particular community living in that area changes. So I think uh, for future, whenever we carry out a case study, uh, it should be looking at that. And the issue which was brought about longitudinal studies, I think that is very apt, because that will talk about impact assessment of the interventions. It is like a feedback mechanism. And IDM has recently conducted a study of Nagapattinam district post tsunami 2004 on the children who were orphaned there, and what are they doing now, and how the policies and interventions of the state has helped them. We'll be coming out with them. That is a longitudinal study which Shri Kamal Kishore ji is talking about, and it is very much required, because then it should not happen that every year we follow the same policies without getting a feedback, a negative feedback or a positive feedback, and we don't change it. So feedback mechanism is through case studies, through lessons learned, through research, and for the feedback to be heard, government and has to give space to the researchers, to the academicians, to come onto the table and hear them out. If it is not, that platform is not given, then it will all go on the shelf and will become yet another document to be referred to by some student who is doing the PhD at some topic. With these words, I will finish here. I once again thank all the panelists and all the participants who came and who have given such good question answers and comments, which when you go through, you understand the depth of knowledge they have, which unfortunately we could not give them a chance to speak because of shortage of time or limitations of time. But we will certainly take all those into account while we are preparing the webinar report. Thank you so much, Anil Katar.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks on today's webinar. Now I request Dr. Harjeet Kaur to kindly propose vote of thanks. Over to you, Harjeet.
Thank you, Anil sir. It's a privilege to take this opportunity to place record vote of thanks for today's webinar. The unique physiographic, socio-economic and climatic attributes of India make it one of the highly disaster-prone countries in the world. Every year, at least one catastrophic event occurred in some or other parts of the nation. Disaster, besides causing challenges to the humankind, also provide equal opportunity to learn from them. Prime Minister 10-point Agenda number 9 exhorts to ensure that the opportunity to learn from a disaster is not wasted. Prime Minister highlighted the fact that although after every disaster there are paper and reports on lessons learned, but those learning are rarely implemented on the ground. We need a more vibrant and visual system of learning. First of all, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our chair, Sri Kamal Kishore, member NDMA, for gracing today's webinar and delivering the keynote address. We are grateful to Sri GVV Sharma, member secretary NDMA, for his enormous cooperation and support in organizing of this webinar series on Prime Minister 10-point Agenda. Also, I wish to express my gratitude to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, ED NIDM, for providing innovative and encouraging environment, moral guidance, continuous enthusiasm, and valuable suggestions throughout NIDM endeavors. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our distinguished speaker, Shri Kamal Kishore, member NDMA, Professor V.K. Sharma, Vice Chairman, Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, Shri Mihir Bhatt, Director AIDMI, Dr. Depriya Datta, Head NRDMS, PST, Dr. Ashish Kumar Srivastava, IS DCMA, Dehradun, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMRT NIDM, for their presence and enlightened our participants with their vast knowledge and experience. I congratulate all the participants for their active participation in this event, as no program can become a successful with a single person. So I extend my big thanks to our GMRD team, Mr. Anil Kathar, moderator and host of today's program, and also our IT team for making this webinar a successful event with their contribution. I end my vote of thanks by saying, sometimes the world needs a crisis, turning challenges into opportunities. Thank you. Dhanyavad.